Listo, gracias. You work remotely. The threat landscape, basically how to protect yourselves or the actual numbers or statistics for threats. And we'll go over some cybersecurity tips on how to protect your data. And at the end, we'll answer some questions and we'll go some of the slides that the chamber prepared for you guys. Some of the facts, basically, 52% or more are working at least once a week, right, from home. Those are actually numbers before this catastrophe. 85% of the millennials are actually love to work from home. There's also nowadays about 5 generations that are working, so obviously we have to keep that in mind. A lot of the people that work remotely accomplish more things in less time. And you also have to think about that we're already living in a very remote environment. You know, we have vendors, we have clients, we have teammates, so we have all these technologies that are in place, and we're already doing it. We're communicating with vendors outside the organization. We have to implement chats. We have to implement email technologies and all these things that allow us to communicate and do our jobs better. And technology and just the work environment in general is changing, right? Employees are now part of 2 or more teams at the same time. You have members that are part of the sales team, the marketing team, or the HR, the operations. So implementing these technologies to work remote actually do help the companies. Additionally, one of the reasons why a lot of the organizations decide to work remotely is to save on money. Basically, they need smaller offices if they allow their employees to work remote. So those are some of the facts, right? The challenges, right? There's a lot of challenges. If you think about it, obviously there's companies that are already prepared, that they already have everything on the cloud, that they can work remotely and that kind of stuff. But most of the companies that don't have this have a lot of challenges. And what are the challenges? As a CEO, as an executive, as a member, or as a manager, you got to make a last-minute decision nowadays, right? You have to say, let's go with it. We have to implement this. We have no choice to do it. But that means that they didn't do the proper planning. Maybe they didn't have the budget. So a lot of these things are challenges for the companies. Now, also keep in mind whether you have the teams to work remotely or not. It's a challenge because the environment has changed, right? Obviously, you have the stress, the psychological factor of the employee. That means, you know, you have all this disease that's out there, and you don't know if it's in your home, not in your home. There's obviously the children. There's no school, right? So they're at home. So those are the factors, that the psychological pieces that as an employer you have to consider. You have to review your current infrastructure, which means you have to review what's available, what technologies can be migrated to allow the employees to work remotely. So that's a challenge. You have to see if you have any legacy technology that might not be able to have an easy path to go to the cloud. Allowing a bring your own device. Right now, basically, we have tons of clients that are asking for laptops, and there's just no supply. The business laptops are all sold out, which makes it a challenge for the employer, allowing the employees to bring their own device, which is also like it could potentially be a threat to the data of the company, right? Obviously, there's the key factor in IT is documentation. There's no documentation, there's no training. It has to be done on the last second, which is also a challenge. The one thing to keep in mind, it's a lot of the companies are saying, well, it's okay, I have a good enough laptop, but it's not really good. But obviously, it's better than not having anything. But something that needs to be considered if there's a mandatory quarantine is if something breaks during that quarantine at the employee's home, that's going to be an issue that you have to consider and think about it, right? And one of the biggest threats nowadays is basically cybersecurity. You got to make sure that all that data is protected. So those are some of the challenges. The basics for the employer, it's basically you have to implement a remote work policy. It has to go, it's kind of like a little bit of HR, IT related, but you have to set up the expectations right with your employees. You have to know how to communicate with them, how they communicate with you back, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and that kind of stuff, so that way the expectations are set and clear. Nowadays, basically, like for example, in my team, everybody has already 2 monitors at home. Everything's available so they can work, and they're taking their equipment with them at night. If there's a mandatory, that you have to be home, mandatory, let's say on Sunday, I have nothing to worry, the company has nothing to worry, they're set, they're prepared, they know what to do. As I mentioned before, analyzing your IT infrastructure is very important. You have to make sure that you're implementing the right cybersecurity tools to make sure that the data is protected at all times. You have to review and make sure that you have a disaster recovery and business continuity plan. This is something that's very common in the state of Florida because we're in hurricanes sectors, right? So if a hurricane comes, let's say, God forbid, and we have to, that's called a disaster, right? Obviously, the hurricane hits. How do we recover while we have a disaster? That's called disaster recovery. But the business continuity aspect is how do we continue operations while we have this disaster? And that's not only related to the technology, but that's basically in all the departments. How are you guys going to make calls? How's your accounting team going to be able to respond? Now companies are implementing a pandemic continuity plan, which is something that not most companies have even thought about it, but now it's something that we have to all think about. Protect against data leaks. That's the most, as I've always mentioned, the people that know me, you're always protecting the data. That's your most important digital asset. Understand overtime rules is going to be important. As I mentioned, we have to make sure that we understand the rules. The employees should know when they're able to work, when they're not able to work, what's billable, what's work, what's not work, and that kind of stuff. So make sure that you understand that and you talk to your HR departments on that. Education's key. It's make sure you have good documentation. Employees should need and know how to connect to the systems, how to protect the systems. So training, it's very important to have a successful strategy for working remotely. From the security perspective, is making sure that all the machines are patched, that you have the latest patches installed. The patch is basically picture hackers finding a little cut on your computers, and they try to take advantage of that cut, and the patch will basically patch it over, not allowing that cut to do any damage. And that's a constant battle of patches and cuts between hackers and the IT departments. So make sure that that's something that you guys are handling properly. The best practice for employees, I was actually one of them, a remote work employee, so I know the pros, the cons, the tricks, and all that stuff. So it's just treated like another day at the office, right? I'm working from home today, but you see me dressed up. I have my shirt, I have my pants, I took a shower in the morning, I drink my coffee. It's just a regular day. You got to make it a habit. It's not like, okay, you wake up in your pajamas and you just sit down. No, it's just another day at the office. Get dressed. Usually when you work remote, you're going to have a lot of video calls. So you have to be ready. So if you get a call, boom, you're ready, you're dressed. Picture your clients, your vendors, they're going to see you this way. You have to, you have corporate culture, you have to portray that image. At your house, set a dedicated area. That's very key. This is your work environment. This is not a playhouse. It's making sure that you have a good work environment that you can work. Pay attention to the ergonomics. Let's get a comfortable chair. You might be sitting down for hours. So make sure that you have a good keyboard, some good chairs, whatever it is, right? I strongly suggest that if you're an employer or employee that you invest in multiple monitors, the productivity and return of investment of a $100 monitor, it's going to surpass how productive you're going to be. Know how to communicate with each other. I cannot enforce more of that, but basically make sure that the expectations are clear, how you're going to communicate, how they're going to be able to talk. A lot of companies have multiple channels of communications. We have phones, we have cell phones, we have laptops, we have all these kind of technologies and software to make sure that everybody knows how to communicate with each other. all right? A lot of the times when we're not facing each other, communication becomes an issue. And sometimes companies or employees spend an enormous amount of time going back and forth in emails. So just pick up the phone, make a quick phone call, and solve the issue. Feedback is also very, very important when you play this role as a remote employee. So ask for feedback to your fellow employees. How are you doing? Make sure the expectations are set. Expectations is key. As long as you're meeting the expectations and everybody has a clear channel of communication, there should not be any problem. It's also very important to have boundaries, right? If you have little kids or loved ones or a significant other, make sure that my computer, it's work. It's not to install video games. It's not to surf the web, whatever it is that you like. You gotta respect my environment, and this is for work, and I gotta respect that. It's also very important that you have some kind of fun or social channel, right? We use a chat software called Slack, which is very common nowadays in the enterprise, and we have a general channel in which we send jokes, we send animated GIFs, we talk about things not related to work. Unfortunately, Brady went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so that was one of the conversations that I saw earlier today. We have a lot of fans that are Patriots, and we have one of the guys that loves the Buccaneers. So that's, just keep the fun, the social environment. It's actually good. The tools needed to work remotely. Obviously, this has to be designed, architect, prepare, but the most common tools that you have out there, it's business class email. So the emails basically the most common right nowadays are Office 365, which is provided by Microsoft, and you have G Suite, which is provided by Google. So those are the actual most common. It starts with that. That's the basis. You have to make sure that you have synchronization of emails, the calendars, and that kind of stuff. The second one, it's most companies have a file sharing tool, right? So how do you share files? How do you share folders, those HR documents, operations? There's several ones. If you go through Office 365 or G Suite, there's a couple. Obviously, you have Google Docs and you have Office 365 OneDrive. So those are one of the things that you can implement. But there's other tools. There's Dropbox, there's Box, there's so many of them. But obviously, you have to do the research to make sure that you select the right one that fits best for your organization. Chat and online meetings, working from home means a lot of video chat, right? Make sure you have the equipment, you have a good camera, that you have a headset, whatever it is, that you have if you have a phone that can connect over the internet, that you have that connectivity, that kind of stuff. If you want a chat messaging software, the most common nowadays, it's one called Slack, S-L-A-C-K, and Microsoft Teams. Those are two of the most common. If you get Office 365, that comes as part of it. A lot of the employees will work from home and they need to have a good VPN, which picture a VPN is just like if you connect an Ethernet cable from your office to your home, but it's virtual. That's all it is. It's good to implement it, but it has to be done for a purpose. So some companies will implement that. Some companies will also implement remote access software, which means that you have a computer at home, at the office, or you have a server at the office and you log into that server. So those are some technologies that you can implement. Also, make sure you have an enterprise level antivirus. You have to make sure that you're protected, that your systems are secure in order to protect the data. Okay. Phones, a lot of the companies have phones, right? We have mobiles and we have regular VoIP, which means voice over the internet phone. So we're always connected. So make sure that you have a communication system that you can make phone calls. And something very important that some people don't think about is when you're doing this migration to the cloud, is making sure that you review all your line of business applications. What's a line of business application? That can be basically, for example, how do you run your accounting? Most companies use QuickBooks How does that run? Does it run on a computer? Does it run on a server? Would you have to migrate it to the cloud? So taking in consideration, if you're in architecture, you probably use AutoCAD. How are you going to manage this line of business applications working remotely? Some of the threats that we have nowadays, basically, it's all related to cybersecurity. Hackers are taking advantage of this situation. So taking care of cybersecurity is one of the biggest concerns. A lot of IT companies are transitioning into IT companies into cybersecurity companies, but the numbers don't lie. Small businesses are a huge target. They're about 43%. Why? Because they don't have the technology that most enterprise companies use. Two, a lot of small businesses do business with big and enterprise companies, so we're a gateway through that to them. So that's basically a challenge. Ransomware, which basically means that your files are now encrypted, and in order to get your files back, you got to pay a hacker in bitcoins to get them back, right? And now it becomes a bidding war. So about 55,000 devices are compromised each month. The fact is, about 60% of those small businesses cannot recover from a cyber attack, and the average remediation for an attack is about $900,000. So the numbers are scary. So implementing the right tools, make sure that you have that you talk to your insurance company to make sure that you have a good cyber liability insurance is very, very important nowadays. So those factors you have to consider when you're going to the cloud. At the end of the day, all we have, it's basically, it's a system, right? You're protecting the system, and it's a noun. It's a set of things working together as parts of a mechanism or an interconnecting network. That's all it is, right? But now, basically, we have to add the part that you're working from home. So you just add it to the system. Make sure that you're protected. Make sure that you're covered. We're going to go over some cybersecurity tips. The main thing here, if you have it or you don't, if you have migrated your files or you have not, the main key, and I'll tell you over and over again, the main key here is avoid duplication of your data at all costs. Last thing in the world is that you don't want to have a versioning control issue. That you have Patrick from accounting putting receivables and making invoices for your company, and at the same time James is doing it, and they're putting their information into two different files. It happens all the time in these migrations that are not properly planned. At the end of the day, what are we trying to accomplish when we do this migration of the data? It's called CIA. It's confidential. Only the right people can access it, right? You don't want marketing accessing confidential information in HR, right? So you got to make sure it's confidential. We're looking for the integrity, meaning that the information is accurate, that if the bank shows you that you have $20,000, you actually have $20,000 and you don't have $3,000, and making sure it's available. Available means that you have that access when you need it in the device that you need it. So the second thing is very important. It's backups. Make sure that you have good backups. Make sure that they're safe. Make sure that nowadays that they're cloud. Make sure that you're planning in case there's a power outage. Check your power supplies at the office, because if you won't be at the office and you have a mandatory stay home policy, who's going to go there, right? Same thing for servers. Make sure that you check the power supplies, because if everybody's connecting to a server at the office and all of a sudden the lights go out or something happens, then you're out of luck. So make sure that you're doing that. I strongly suggest that you work with an MSP. What is an MSP? MSP is called a managed services provider. What is that, right? You're probably asking yourselves that. But all it is basically IT companies that do what we do. They're called MSPs. Same thing if somebody in accounting does accounting, right? Obviously, they're called accountants. That's basically all it is. Or make sure that you have a good professional or somebody in-house that's really doing this. It's very important that when you're doing this whole migration and planning, that you look at integrations and you look at all these things that make the return on investment positive return on investment on what you're trying to accomplish. There's a lot of companies that are offering emergency offers, but make sure you're not falling for any scams, right? Like Microsoft is offering 6 months to try out their services. You have backup companies offering backup services. Just make sure that you're signing up for the right offers. If you have a question, you can always contact me and I can guide you through it. Make it easy for users if you're implementing these technologies. A lot of the companies that you will be signing up have their own self-service portals that the employee is allowed to input their password and go through the whole process just by clicking next, next, next. MFA, for those that don't know what it is, it's called multi-factor authentication. And that means that, like for example, if you log into your webmail and you put your password, that's one way you're authenticated, by putting a password. The second way of doing it is basically, it can be by a biometric, it can be by having an authenticator app, like it sends a specific password to your phone. So having multi-factor authentication, it's a good way of preventing hacking, right? Because anybody can hack your password, but obviously the odds that are very low that they have your password and they also have possession of your phone with them. So making sure that you're doing that. So that's some of the cybersecurity tips. We have more. Making sure that you encrypt the drives. What does that mean, right? Encrypting the drive. So picture you go to, let's say you go to a Starbucks and you go to the bathroom and you tell the neighbor that's sitting next to you, saying, hey, can you look at my computer for a minute? I'm just going real quick to the bathroom. You come back and the neighbor took your computer, right? What are you going to do? You have your financials, you have your pictures, you have everything in there. But just making sure that if the machine's encrypted, then the drive, if they take it out and they're trying to see what's in there, they're not going to be able to see it because it needs a key to actually decrypt it. So making sure that the devices are encrypted, making sure you have a secure connection to the office, that it's encrypted as well, so that way no data in between your home and the office is compromised. If the companies are able to provide you with a specific, either a firewall or a wireless access point dedicated for that, it will be amazing. A lot of the routers that you have at home have the capability of implementing multiple wireless, so please separate the ones from your home with the ones from work. Making sure that you have a secure way of emailing. Implementing, this is more from the perspective of employer, but implementing a web filtering is important. What does that mean, right? Web filtering. That means if they go to an adult, like a pornography website or a gambling website, automatically the machine won't even go there, right? Now, let's say marketing, right? Marketing needs social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those, so that machine's allowed to go to that. But HR doesn't need social media, right? HR needs access to Monster.com, and because they're always looking for the talent. So implementing web filtering policy is very important. The cloud storage, we talk about that. Have some kind of device management. It's very important. If you lose a phone, if they lose the computer, anything in between, making sure that you can wipe those devices. Simplify your security issue reporting. It's a lot of the companies don't know. It's part of the communications, part of the expectations, right? If you have a problem, you're going to email this particular address, and this particular team is going to contact you for the issue and how to resolve it. They need to have all those things in place. Everybody needs to be on the same page. They need to understand that, right? For example, in our company, we have help at Simplitfy.com. Anybody that has an issue, it's centralized, it's manageable, it's accountable, it's trackable. And beware of shadow IT. Right now, it's basically very important that making sure you don't fall for any scams, making sure that there's nobody taking an opportunity out of this disaster to make your a hacking or something like that. So that's very important. At the end, if you look cybersecurity in a nutshell, it's very easy. You start with a firewall. That's basically it's a steel door, right? A lot of the companies will implement at home for remote employees one of those little routers that they buy at Best Buy. They're good, obviously, but they're kind of like patio doors, right? A patio door is going to be great, but it's only going to protect you from bugs and water, right? So making sure that you have a steel door but also making sure that the steel door is not open, right? If you go to the bank, the steel door is closed. What's the purpose of having a firewall or a steel door if it's open? Making sure that that's correctly configured, that goes along with your wireless, making sure that a lot of the times, a lot of companies or a lot of people are getting hacked because they buy one of those little Chinese manufacturing parts from eBay that turn on and off lights from your phone. Yeah, they're great. I can turn the lamp from my phone, but you can get hacked through those. So anything that's Internet of Things devices to make the smarter homes, make sure you have an isolated wireless for that. Make sure you have some web filtering controls. We talk about that automatically pornography is blocked, gambling is blocked. Some companies you can even block weapons and things like that. Right? Obviously, there's a lot of companies or a lot of business or industries that need that, but it's something that you can consider doing. Encryption, we spoke about that, making sure that those hard drives are encrypted, very important. Mobile, making sure if I lose my phone, there it is, sorry. If I lose my phone, I call my team and say, hey, wipe my phone. Right? A lot of people will come to me, oh yeah, but I have to find my iPhone, right? It's great, but when you want to go in and you got to log in somewhere else and you're trying to wipe your phone, it's going to tell you, okay, I'm going to send you a 6-digit code, but you don't have your phone, right? So making sure that you have all those processes in place and make sure you have a good server and endpoint. That's just basically antivirus for your servers and antivirus for your endpoints. Very important. So now is the time that I ask for questions. If anybody has some questions, obviously Chastity is still on the line. Now it's probably a good time for her to come back in.
I'm back. So I have a question, Eric. You were speaking more about, let's say, if we were speaking in Troy's aspect and how he would set us up, the chamber, to work remotely from home. But what about the smaller guy who is just an independent 1 or 2 employees and they're trying to find those webcams and what kind of webcams should they get, and is their own personal home router enough to sustain their business and things like that? Where would they go? Because I know that there are some things that you can't find them right now because everybody's doing this whole web thing.
Absolutely.
What would you suggest? Are there like any secret websites that you may know of that we can go and buy some webcams that nobody's trying to get all of them from?
Well, equipment's a little hard, right? Because obviously there's the stores that have limited supplies. So from the webcam, you might have to wait, right? You can order online. You can so many ways, but from the security perspective, if you don't have the ability to implement a firewall or implement all these tools, there's always software-based tools that you can implement. So you don't have to buy actual equipment. There's layers of protection, and you have some layers of the ability to protect yourself with some layers related to software. But as I said, a lot of MSPs nowadays are offering complimentary assessments that they can help you with. Obviously, we're here to help the community. We understand how frustrating these times are for everyone, but those are basically some tips.
Thank you. Does anybody here have any questions that they would like to ask? You don't want to speak, you can say it through the chat. If you don't know where the chat is, you can put your cursor over the bottom toolbar of your screen and it will show up where it says participants, share screen, or chat. And then you have the ability to chat. You can select everyone, you can select privately. You don't have to say who you are if you don't want to ask a question, you want it to be anonymous.
No questions. Good. Comment. Yes, John. Go ahead.
First off, thanks for doing this, Eric. I'm listening to you talk like, oh my God, there's so many things I don't know. But from the layman's point, I was able to sign up for this Zoom because somebody told me about it earlier in the week. And it's actually been a much better way for me to explain documents to my clients. So, while this is not good, something good is going to come out of this. So my biggest question, I think somebody just asked it, is Like when you do something like this, can you record it and then play it for somebody later?
You can. Obviously, I'm not sure what Zoom's doing. I know they're giving free controls, free accounts, but like for example, the version that I have is $15 a month, and it allows me to add that background that you see in the back. It allows me to do other things, more participants, that you can record the calls. But yes, at the end, yes, you can do those things, absolutely.
Any other questions?
So Chastity, you want me to review
Oh, wait,
this
somebody
slide?
says,
Oh,
oh, wait, they're coming in too fast. Questions, can you
oh, there
give
you
a
go.
workshop about how to use some of the apps? We're
Oh,
working
there you
on
go.
several workshops, so we'll keep you all posted on that. Eric, you want to read Arlene's?
Yes, Arlene Smart. Thank you, Arlene, for joining the call. If two people are telecommuting from the same household, do you recommend they be on separate Wi-Fis? It depends what you're using for it depends if you're working for the same company. If you're working for the same company, it should be okay. It should be isolated, different companies. Okay. I would strongly suggest to separate them in case there's a data breach and it comes back to you because the other computer, then they're on isolated networks. So the chances that you'll get in trouble are low, right? Obviously, these are the things that the employee shouldn't really be worried. It's more of the employer aspect. But ideally, yes. If you don't have the capabilities of doing so, at least making sure that you have the software or the antivirus protection or the security running on that machine to protect and isolate it from the software level. So that would be the recommendation there.
Renata.
Renata, I can get back on you with that. I have to see it. I know that Zoom has a free version, but I have your information. I'll contact you and I'll send you that information. Just everybody, Renata's asking what kind of Zoom account does she need? Does she need a pro or a business account? I don't know on top of my head, but I'll definitely get you an answer. Okay.
And just to jump in, we're going to be offering a virtual event sometime next week. We'll keep you all posted regarding how to do webinars, what platforms are best for you to do webinars, and how to keep connected. It's kind of like how to do a webinar for dummies. So we know that there's a lot of people, including us, who are doing this for the first time. So we want to make sure we keep our members educated.
So the chamber, thank you, Chastity, and everybody, Troy, and everyone, Sarah, of all the work that you're doing. But they have, if you go to the bocachamber.com, bocachamber.com, they have a link for coronavirus resources. I was reading some information earlier about if you want a loan and tips and how to protect yourselves. It's actually very resourceful. I thank you for that. But everybody should actually visit. At the bottom, you have the link, which is very important. Thank you, Louis, for that. I appreciate it. And then also the app. I don't know if everybody has it or everybody has downloaded it. It's very easy to download. You open up the iOS App Store or Google Android Store and download it. If you see that's the icon in the middle, that's how it's going to look, making sure that you download the right one. But it allows you to connect directly into the chamber world, right? It socializes on social media. You can read up on the latest news. The directory is actually very cool. And you can it's allowing you giving you the resources to enhance your chamber experience overall. So go ahead and download it. It's very good. And lastly, if anybody wants to get a hold of us or myself, basically my contact information is there. I'm always an email, a text, a call away. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And if anybody's interested or anybody has concerns, we're offering a complimentary assessment to any of the fellow chamber members. All you have to do is when you call us or contact us, just make sure that you tell us that you're part of the Boca Chamber. And we'll be more than happy to assist you in any possible way that we can. And basically, thank you so much for joining today, taking a little bit of your time. And I hope everyone is safe out there and making sure that that this doesn't affect your businesses and your personal lives and families.
I'd like to thank you, Eric, and everybody else who came on the webinar today. Just want to let you know, like Eric said, we do have tons of resources on our chamber website, so be sure to check that out. We're updating that every time we get new information, every time we get new links for where you can get, I guess, applications for the disaster relief funds or anything that you need. You can just come to the Chamber's website and get those resources. You can give us a call. We're all working for you. We're here if you have any questions, if you just want to vent, or you just want to, get away from your desk for a minute and you need just somebody to talk to. The Chamber's here for you, and we would love to speak with you. Thank you again, Eric. If you have any questions after you have information, you have my contact information. If you think of a question that you didn't think of right now, you can still ask. And thank you for joining us, and everybody stay healthy, and we'll see you soon at a virtual event near you. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Bye.